Halo 2. A legendary game that's just as famous for being an iconic, revolutionary piece of FPS history as it is a cautionary tale of overambition and by extension the importance of a thorough polishing pass. Halo 2 is particularly infamous for its extremely punishing level of difficulty, especially on Legendary where you're only ever able to pop out from cover for a couple seconds at a time. So, with the lessons Bungie themselves learned in hand, let's change that. Heyo, I'm Ruby of Blue, and I'm making Halo 2 Rebalanced, a mod which aims to explore and realize the full potential of Halo 2 through sandbox and difficulty design, cut content, and new layers of polish. This mod is something which started as a small side hobby to simply make the game more fun for myself through small tweaks to numbers under the hood. Fast forward a few years and that's turned into... Yeah, so the project's grown a bit. If you want to help this new mini-series grow, be sure to give this vid a like, hit subscribe, and consider supporting me on Patreon. As I'm sure we're all aware, Halo 2 is a game infamous for its chaotic development. Bungie struggled to decide what they wanted to do with the game for the first couple of years, before realizing the original Xbox just couldn't handle their vision, leading to them scrapping almost everything and starting fresh a mere 10 months before the target release date. Despite that, Halo 2 still stands strong as many people's favorite in the series, and its fast-paced gameplay, more complex storytelling, and revolutionary matchmaking which redefined online multiplayer on console. But because of that fast-track development, many elements of the game didn't receive the polish and attention they needed to be as good as they could be.
When we realized it was just too late. It wasn't that time to put that polish on the game. Don't worry. And that was pretty heartbreaking for everybody.
One such area which desperately needed a good couple of weeks to iron out was the overall balance of the difficulty. Bungie was fighting against the limitations of the original Xbox throughout the entire process, and at the rear end of development, demands for steady and consistent performance all but required that several encounters all across the game have their AI and object count cut. This then led to a frantic rebalancing of the game difficulty to account for the huge decrease in how many AI can appear at a single time. The result was overcorrecting in the form of the harsh and unforgiving legendary difficulty the game shipped with. Psst, wanna know a secret? Those last couple of clips were on heroic difficulty. That's pretty dire. Jamie Griesmer, the design lead for most Bungie Halo games, and someone whom we'll be referring to a lot in this series, was fully aware of the state of Legendary and agrees it went way overboard.
Unfortunately, it is still more punishing, and especially on Marines. And so when you get something like a jetpack elite wielding 2 plasma rifles, you get a game that's really way too hard.
And to add insult to injury, the PC port of Halo 2 exacerbated all of these issues thanks to the higher tick rate, including less delay to the AI's first burst, and an absurd increase to their rate of fire in many cases. The great thing about modding, and somewhat of a curse, is having the luxury of infinite time to polish and fine-tune things, the power of hindsight on design decisions made, context of all the games released in the series since, and in this case especially, no longer being held back by the original hardware. So with all these luxuries considered, let's dive into how Halo 2 is designed, explore the ways which Bungie's design philosophy evolved over time, and find all the different ways we can fine-tune the difficulty of Halo 2 for a fun, fair, and engaging challenge. When it comes to fine-tuning the difficulty of a Halo game, both for the lower end of normal and the higher end of legendary, it'll help if we break down the factors affecting the level of challenge and punishment. The biggest and most important elements being AI firing patterns, which includes their firing delay, level of competency, and time to ramp up between their starting and ending bursts, and the core health system, particularly your amount of vitality and whether or not your health regenerates, which we'll tackle first. To understand how Halo 2's health system came to be, let's first take a look at its older brother, Halo. To set itself apart from the competition and to make the game more accessible beyond hardcore FPS fans, Halo pioneered a hybrid vitality system of recharging energy shields and non-recharging health. This added an extra layer of strategy to your offensive and defensive plays, as health was a resource which you spent to make risky plays, or lost at the cost of mistakes made. It's something that helps shape Halo's unique gameplay flow of shifting between going on the offense versus pulling back and defending, something which I like to call the push and pull dynamic. Coming to Halo 2, health packs initially remained, but Bungie experimented with this system by making player health recharge very slowly over time. The rationale being that, in Halo 1, players could be at any level of health coming into a new encounter, and so that made it harder for them to design their missions with escalating difficulty, without restricting the tactics low health players can employ. So their solution was to ensure every player was at the same level of health at the start of every new encounter, giving them more room to push on the player with more difficult, climactic segments of gameplay, and thus provide a more consistent experience for everyone. Throughout the dev process, player health kept getting lowered more and more over time as everything was tuned, culminating in what we have today, your shields being slightly lowered and your health being reduced by over half. In making health such an insignificant portion of the player's total vitality, health packs were made redundant and removed, automatic fast regeneration becoming the sole means to refill player health. By that point, health management had become so superfluous that they chose to stop showing the health bar entirely, the intention being to scare players into taking cover as soon as their shields dropped, essentially communicating that no shields equals imminent death. Furthermore, as Halo 2 was hopeful to blow up the popularity of Xbox Live, multiplayer became a much bigger factor to consider when designing the game. I suspect this to be another big reason Halo 2 moved to a simple system of pure recharging vitality, as Bungie likely decided the gameplay dynamic of health management didn't gel with their vision of a symmetrical PvP mode designed around headshot-focused gameplay and keeping every player in the action. To that end, player shields would take a shorter time to start recharging, so you wouldn't need to spend as much time covering. And to go along with this, the shield bar was moved to on top of the motion sensor, so you're better able to see any bad guys approaching to flush you out of cover, further intensifying combat. Balancing this new health system between multiplayer and campaign proved to be tricky, as Halo 2 also introduced many more enemies which use weapons with high velocity projectiles, or hit scan if you prefer. I'm sure we all know where this is going. Unfortunately, this combined with the overtuned AI firing competency and the much smaller pool of vitality created a nasty storm of incredibly frustrating and unfair gameplay, where all throughout the campaign and countless encounters you can be lasered from several angles with virtually or literally no chance to react. Health regeneration was intended to prevent players from being restricted by low health coming into difficult encounters. But ironically, all of these overcorrections culminated in Halo 2 putting every player in that situation. It's like if Halo 1 kept you stuck at 1 bar of health for the entire game. That's not to say this particular health system can't work. Halo 3 looked at all of the issues that plagued Halo 2's difficulty and greatly improved on several fronts, reeling in AI firing competency in general to be much more manageable, having Jackal snipers take much longer to fire their first burst, often missing their first shot to give the player a chance to react. But maybe most impactful of all, buffing the player's health to something much more reasonable. So once this balancing framework's flaws have been ironed out, it's really up to preference whether you prefer 2 and 3's style of fast-paced gameplay with more immediate consequences, versus CE's more methodical strategy-based gameplay pace. But when it comes to the design approach for Halo 2 Rebalanced, I had a rather ambitious idea. What if we brought Halo 2 back in line with Halo CE's style of difficulty, making it so health doesn't regenerate, but having a much larger buffer of vitality which is visible at all times, and retuning the entire game around that foundation? No easy task, to be sure, but I'm of the onion that CE's balancing framework provides for a much more consistently fair, 3-dimensional gameplay loop, which is also much more palatable to design enemies and encounters around. First, because CE's balancing framework is optimized for single player, unlike Halo 2 which has to balance with multiplayer in mind. Second, it adds an extra layer of strategy managing non-recharging health provides, and how it strengthens Halo's gameplay dynamic of push and pull. Third, it provides much more room for experimentation with different sandbox tactics because, fourth, rather than punishing your mistakes with an immediate death and revert, your mistakes instead build up over time, building the level of punishment you receive until the cycle resets with the health pack, creating an overarching context across multiple encounters. I think CE's balancing framework has a ton of potential to elevate Halo 2's campaign and open up new ways to enjoy it that would be tricky to achieve otherwise. And since we don't have to worry about multiplayer balancing, we can focus on polishing the single-player experience to shine as bright as it can. Of course, for this to even work, we need to bring the player's health back into visibility. Thankfully, the function for which still exists in the game engine, so it was no problem. Thanks to H2R team member Paddy T, our trusty 2D artist, we have a simple redesign of the shield meter for both Chief and Arbiter that keeps the style and shape intact, while adding a health bar that wraps over it. If I were making a Halo game in a vacuum, I'd definitely opt for the top center placement of the meter that has become series standard. But in this case, I wanted to stay true to Bungie's intention of keeping the shield bar close to the radar to easily gauge the danger around you when in cover. The next step would be, of course, putting in some health packs. Thankfully, its functionality was left completely intact from CE, although weirdly, the texture was of much lower quality than CE's. Hell, that goes for all of Halo 2's equipment pickups. So, H2R team members Luna and Mynameislol took some time to bring them all back up to par. Next, I realized things would be more complicated than simply changing some numbers around for our new gameplay foundation to work. As Halo 2 is designed around fully automatic health regeneration, that naturally meant Bungie no longer had to contrive reasons for random health packs to be scattered around the world, resulting in entirely Covenant-centric missions with nary a hint of human involvement. So unless I was gonna bend myself into a pretzel conveying how human health packs could find their way onto the Prophet's holy city high charity, I'd need to get creative. So I drafted up a concept sketch of what a Covenant health pack could look like. Something with Halo 2's Covenant color tones and bright neon lights that would help with visibility. Sufficiently alien looking with these Covey-style curves, but still recognizable and reminiscent of Halo's iconic health pack design. After that, Luna created the model and scaled down its poly count to fit with Halo 2's level of fidelity. And there we have it, a Covenant health pack to place as we please. So, with high hopes and wide eyes, I hopped in to begin production with Halo 2 Rebalanced. Only, there was yet another problem. One that would throw a spanner in the works and ruin the whole plan to retune Halo 2's framework before it ever got off the ground. You see, not only does Halo 2 Vanilla refill your health to full shortly after your shields recharge, but upon implementing the health bar, we realized that with every checkpoint, your health is automatically refilled to full. So unless I could find a way to disable this, that'd drastically affect how I tune the mod from there. This turned out to be a hard-coded function Bungie added to every script expression that executes checkpoints. At this point it was clear, if I wanted to achieve my goals I had to hunker down and employ some dirty workarounds. The solution I came up with was to build a scripting system that would allow me to preserve both players' health between checkpoints. This involved carefully controlling checkpoint distribution and caching both players' health values when one was executed, to ensure your health always stays the same. It took quite a bit of experimenting with all the different capabilities of HaloScript, working out the math and fiddling around with the timing, and I'll probably continue to improve and refine it further, but I had successfully gotten around Halo 2's auto health refills. With all those hurdles out of the way, I was finally able to start rebuilding Halo 2 around this health system. Now that the foundation has been built, it's time to work out the next equally important step of tuning the difficulty in a first-person shooter. How do ranged AI combatants interact with the player? Design lead Jamie Griesmer described the plasma pistol and plasma rifle as emblematic of Halo's difficulty tuning, using them as the benchmark for creating a fun and engaging gameplay flow across all difficulties. In Halo CE, the plasma pistol, most often used by the clumsy weak grunts, fired a slow projectile that was easy to dodge, giving opportunity for players to strafe and play aggressively in the open. On the other side of the coin, the plasma rifle, used by the nimble and skilled elites, fired a projectile with a much higher initial velocity, dynamically shifting the flow of combat where you made the choice between staying aggressive at the risk of spending some health, or fighting from cover to preserve that health for the long term. This, together with CE's larger buffer of non-regenerating health, contributed to that dynamic push-and-pull gameplay flow. To complement this, every AI actor had their own set of firing patterns, which increased in aggression and competency the higher the tier of the character or rank. So, certain ranks became more dangerous than others, shifting pressure on the fly and calling on the player to prioritize their targets. Then we come to Halo 2 by contrast, where for the most part, AI possesses similar god-tier aggressive, laser-accurate firing, which only got more overwhelming the higher the difficulty. This, combined with the decrease to player health and shields from CE to 2, forces the player to hug cover at virtually all times, lest you be punished with immediate death, resulting in a game which careens hard into the pull side of Halo's flow and almost never leaves it, slowing the gameplay pace to a crawl. Now, it'd be easy to say, oh, just make the AI less accurate and call it a day, but that'd be underestimating just how far Halo's systems can go to refine things. Let me explain. Every Halo game has a function which defines an AI's firing patterns between the start of their burst when spotting a target to the end of their burst and how long it takes them to ramp up between. Halo CE and Halo 3 both make prominent use of this mechanic, where AI start their bursts more slow and inaccurate, but will ramp up over time to pile on the pressure. The idea being to provide room for players to emerge from cover and play aggressive, while at the same time creating a player-driven dance of gameplay referred to as reciprocal difficulty, where the harder you push the enemy, the harder they push back. At that point, the combat flow shifts to either push you into the defensive, or you quickly break through an encounter by taking risks and exerting your mastery over the game. In addition, Halo has always made use of increasing enemy damage the higher the difficulty. However, the crux of increasing challenge has predominantly lied on speeding up that combat dance, making the gameplay beats faster by shortening the time it takes for AI to ramp up between their starting and ending bursts. This increase in the speed of gameplay is also reflected in your shields in CE, which recharge faster on higher difficulties. Halo 2 still features all of these same systems that contribute to CE and 3's success, but it falters in the execution. There's very little disparity in the firing competency between starting and ending bursts, and with a few exceptions, the time it takes to ramp up to full-on Legendary is a mere 1 second. So, through a combination of increasing the ramp-up time, widening the gap in firing competency between the starting and ending bursts, and giving every type of AI their own range of firing patterns based on how high their rank is, we can effectively rein in Halo 2's static and overwhelming gameplay pace to match the much more polished and dynamic pacing of CE and 3, providing significantly more room for Halo's combat dance to breathe and swing back and forth like it should. Halo isn't a pure run and gun like Doom, but it's not a slow tactical cover shooter like Medal of Honor either. It's a unique first-person shooter with a free-flowing, player-driven push and pull of attacking and defending. Having made all of these changes, it's surreal to play Halo 2's higher difficulty in a context where you're not always 1 second away from instant demise. It opens up more opportunities to take risks, trying different sandbox combinations, and ultimately strategize in a way that is more interesting than just avoid instant death. Enemies Halo 2 introduced that struggled to be fun fighting against have much more room for you to interact with now. You can be shot by a sniper jackal and with quick enough reaction time, avoid losing health by covering or quickly counterattacking. You have a bigger window to move out in the open and outstrafe the big ambushes of drones, deciding for yourself when the pressure gets too heavy and to pull back, rather than memorizing their spawns and being forced to hide the instant they appear. You can engage in a tug-of-war of aggression versus brutes, having more opportunities to get close and contend with their large pool of health, as opposed to the only somewhat safe tactic of staying out of their range and picking them off. I could go on, but ultimately, we'll see if this makeover to Halo 2's systems was successful once the mod is released and in your hands. Something people tend to overlook when it comes to Halo 2 is the stark lack of overshield and active camo pickups in campaign. These power-ups were a valuable element to CE's campaign that rewarded exploration or were used to create unique gameplay challenges. It's unclear why Bungie decided to forego their inclusion in Halo 2's campaign, but if I had to guess, it's likely due to the Arbiter always having active camo as an innate ability. But to me, putting power-ups back in Halo 2's campaign is an easy slam dunk to open up new fun possibilities for designing encounters, and rewards for exploring hidden corners of the world. The only uncertainty was how the active camo power-up would interact with Arbiter's built-in ability, but surprisingly, it behaves exactly how you'd expect. If you activate Arby's camo while the power-up is active, its timer will simply be overridden and the power-up removed once becoming visible again. So don't do that. So now Halo 2's campaign has been revamped to accommodate a system using health packs, along with the restoration of overshield and active camo. I'm still trying to get a feel for where and how often I should hand out these new goodies, but overall I'm very happy with the progress so far. I'm glad I chose to tackle all of the fundamental gameplay systems first, even if it did take a while, because this new design framework adapted into Halo 2 is going to inform everything about the gameplay and mission design moving forward. So for now, it's time to get back to work. But be on the lookout because more deep dives into the design of Halo 2, just like this one, are headed this way. I'm hoping to make these shorter form videos on a more regular basis, so make sure you're subscribed and maybe chip in a couple of bucks on my Patreon if you want, for a perk to access new videos a week early. Thank you to the REBALANCED team who elevated this project beyond what I had ever hoped for. They have made some insane contributions I can't wait to share with you all. Peace out everybody and see you soon.